"I can make your father walk again," said the beggar boy to the rich woman on the road. Sarah Campbell slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt on the dusty road. Her heart pounded as she saw the barefoot boy pointing directly at her father in the passenger seat in a wheelchair. How could that dirty, ragged child know about Arthur's condition? "I can make your father walk again," the boy repeated, approaching the open window with a determination that belied his apparent 10 years of age. Sarah looked at her father, who had turned his face to the window, avoiding eye contact. It had been 3 years since Arthur Campbell had moved his legs, ever since the day he discovered that the family business was completely bankrupt. "Boy, get out of the car's way," Sarah replied impatiently, starting the engine again. "Mom, please, just listen to me for a minute," the boy insisted, placing his small, dirty hands on the glass. "I know he doesn't have anything broken in his legs. I know he stopped walking because he became very sad." Sarah froze. That information hadn't been in the papers. The doctors had been categorical. There was no physical injury to justify the paralysis. Arthur had simply lost the will to walk after discovering that his partner, Robert Miller, had embezzled millions from the company that bore the family name. "How do you know that?" Sarah asked, rolling down the window completely. "My grandfather was a physical therapist. He lived here in the community before he passed away. He taught me that sometimes people stop walking, not because they can't, but because they don't want to try anymore." Arthur finally looked at the boy, his blue eyes meeting the child's dark, bright eyes. "And you think you can solve what the best doctors couldn't?" Sarah questioned, but there was something in the boy's voice that made her hesitate. "I won't promise a miracle, ma'am, but I can try. My grandfather left me some things, some exercises he did with people. It cost nothing to try." Sarah looked at her father, who for the first time in months showed some interest in anything. Arthur nodded slightly. "What's your name, boy?" "David. And I live there in the community." Sarah knew the area. It was a humble settlement on the outskirts of the city where she had grown up before her father built his empire. It had been decades since she had set foot there. "Okay, David. You can come to our house tomorrow morning, but only once." "Understood." The boy's face lit up with a smile that revealed some missing teeth. "Thank you very much, Mom. You'll see it will work out." The next day, Sarah was waiting in the living room of the mansion when the maid, Martha, came to tell her there was a boy at the back door. "Miss Sarah, there's a dirty child asking to come in. I told him you don't receive beggars." "Let him in, Martha. It's the boy we talked to yesterday." Martha returned a few minutes later with David, who was carrying an old cloth bag and seemed even smaller inside the luxurious house. "Good morning, Miss Sarah. I brought my grandfather's things," David said, lifting the bag. "What kind of things?" David opened the bag and began to pull out strange objects, pieces of wood, ropes, some rubber balls, and what looked like an old notebook. "These are the equipment my grandfather used. He said you didn't need expensive things to help people." Sarah led David to her father's room on the ground floor, adapted after the accident. Arthur was in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Dad, David came to do the exercises." "Good morning, Mr. Arthur," David greeted respectfully. "Are you ready to start?" Arthur turned to look at the boy, and something in his eyes changed. Perhaps it was the simplicity or the sincerity, but he nodded positively. David began by explaining simple breathing exercises, then arm movements. He spoke with impressive naturalness for someone so young. "My grandfather always said that when we get very sad, we forget we have a body. Then the body also forgets how to function." For 2 hours, David guided Arthur through gentle movements, massaging his legs with techniques he seemed to have learned by observing an experienced professional. "I felt a tingling," Arthur whispered. It was the first thing he had said in days. "That's good, Mr. Arthur. It means you're waking up." When the session ended, Sarah accompanied David to the door. "David, where exactly do you live?" "On the street, ma'am. I live with other Boys under the overpass. Sarah felt her chest tighten. That boy who had brought the first hope to her father in 3 years was living on the streets. And your family? I don't have any anymore, ma'am. My mother passed away when I was 6. That's when I went to live with my grandfather. He taught me everything I know, but he passed away last year. The constant use of the word passed away instead of died touched Sarah in an inexplicable way. Can you come back tomorrow? Yes, Miss Sarah. I'll take good care of your father. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like it and especially subscribe to the channel. This helps us a lot as we're just starting. Continuing. In the following weeks, David began visiting the mansion daily. He always arrived at the same time, carrying his bag of improvised tools. Martha, initially resistant, began leaving snacks in the kitchen for the boy. During the sessions, David told stories of overcoming adversity that he had heard in the community where he grew up. He spoke of Miss Eleanor, who walked again after a stroke, of Mr. John, who regained movement in his hands after a work accident. My grandfather used to say that our body is like a little plant. If we don't take care of it, don't water it, it withers. But if we take good care of it, it can always sprout again. Arthur began to show small movements in his feet during the exercises. First just his toes, then small tremors in his ankles. Sarah observed everything with a mixture of hope and disbelief. How did you learn all this, David? She asked one day. I used to watch my grandfather work. He couldn't read or write, but he had a way with people. He said that before healing the body, you had to heal the heart. The routine had created a strange normality in the house. Arthur began asking about David on days when the boy didn't show up because of rain or other commitments in the community. Miss Sarah, can I ask a question? David said one afternoon. Of course. Why did Mr. Arthur get so sad? What happened at the company? Sarah hesitated. She had never explained the details to anyone but the lawyers. Someone my father trusted very much stole the company's money. A lot of money. Almost everything. Is that man in jail? No, he was very clever. He did it in a way that made it look like my father stole it. David processed the information in silence, his dark eyes showing a maturity that didn't match his age. That's why Mr. Arthur feels guilty. It's not just sadness, it's guilt. The precision of the observation surprised Sarah. How do you know that? I've seen many adults like that in the community. When things go wrong, they think it's their fault, even when it's not. That night, Sarah had difficulty sleeping. David's simple words had touched on something she couldn't name. Perhaps she also carried guilt for not having noticed in time what Robert was doing. The next day, during the session, Arthur managed to deliberately move his toes when David asked. It was the first time he had obeyed a voluntary motor command in 3 years. You did it! David shouted, jumping for joy. Mr. Arthur, you did it! Tears streamed down Arthur's face. Sarah, who was observing from the doorway, also cried. David, do you want to have dinner with us tonight? Sarah offered. Can I, Ma'am? Of course you can. During dinner, David ate politely, but Sarah noticed how he put some pieces of bread in his pocket. David, you can take food for your friends. You don't have to hide it. The boy blushed. Sorry, Miss Sarah, it's just that little Pete is sick and couldn't go out to look for food today. How many boys live with you? There are 5 of us. There's little Pete, who's 8, Carlos, who's 15, John, who's 12, and Michael, who's 7. Sarah felt her chest tighten again. 5 children living on the streets while she wasted food in her mansion. David, would you like to sleep here tonight? I have a guest room. I can't. Ma'am, the boys need me. What if I sent food for all of them today? Really? Would you do that? Martha, prepare a large basket of food. David will take it to his friends. When David left carrying 2 bags full of food, Sarah felt something moving inside her, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. In the following days, Arthur showed consistent progress. He could move his feet, bend his knees slightly, and even feel when David touched his legs. Miss Sarah, I need to tell you, Something, David said one afternoon. What is it? Yesterday I saw a man lurking around your house, a man in a suit, a bit heavy, driving a black car. What did he look like? Grey hair, a mustache? He stood on the other side of the street for about 20 minutes just watching. Sarah felt a chill. The description matched Robert Miller perfectly. David, if you see that man again, let me know immediately, okay? Okay, Mom. Is he dangerous? I don't know, but I prefer you to be careful. That night, Sarah received a call from the bank informing her that there was a buyer interested in the mansion. The amount offered was ridiculously low, but the manager insisted it was the only viable proposal, considering the family's debts. Who is the buyer? Sarah asked. A businessman named Robert Miller. He said he knows the family and wants to help. Sarah hung up the phone with trembling hands. Robert was coming back to deliver the final blow. The next day, she told her father about the call. Arthur became visibly agitated, losing some of the progress he had made in recent weeks. He wants to take our house too, Arthur whispered. We won't let him, Dad. We'll find a solution. There's no solution, Sarah. He won. During the session that afternoon, David noticed that something was wrong. Mr. Arthur is different today. Did something happen? Sarah explained the situation to David in a simplified way. The boy listened in silence, processing every word. What if you didn't have to sell the house? What do you mean? What if the house brought in money instead of just spending? Sarah didn't understand what David was getting at. Explain better. In the community, Ms. Emily turns her house into a place where people go to learn to cook. She charges a small fee, and everyone is happy. Are you suggesting I turn this house into a cooking school? No. I'm suggesting you turn it into a place where people like Mr. Arthur can come to do their exercises. The idea was so simple that Sarah almost laughed, but the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. David, do you think that would work? I'm sure. I know a lot of people in the community who needed help just like your father. People who don't have money to pay expensive doctors, but can pay a smaller amount. That night, Sarah stayed awake thinking about David's proposal. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of the mansion full of people recovering, laughing, living. But the next day, reality knocked. On the door, literally, Robert Miller appeared in person to pay a visit. Sarah, dear, Robert said with a false smile when Martha led him to the living room. How's your father? What do you want here, Robert? I came to make a generous offer. I know you're going through financial difficulties. Robert placed an envelope on the coffee table. This is my offer for the mansion. It's less than it's worth. But considering the circumstances, Sarah opened the envelope. The amount offered barely covered half the debts. It's a joke, Robert. It's reality, my dear. You have no choice. Yes, we do. We won't sell. Robert stood up, losing his cordial composure. Sarah, you don't understand the situation. Without this sale, you'll lose everything anyway. At least this way you'll have something. Get out of my house, Robert. You have a week to reconsider. After that, my offer will no longer be available. When Robert left, Sarah found David hidden behind the window curtain. Was that the man you saw yesterday? Yes, Miss Sarah. He seems very bad. He is very bad, David. That afternoon, during the session with Arthur, David asked if he could bring some friends from the community the next day. What kind of friends? People who need help just like your father. I want to show them that it's possible to get better. Sarah hesitated. The idea of strangers in her house still made her uncomfortable. David, I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, Miss Sarah. It's just to show that it works. If it doesn't work, I'll never ask again. Arthur, who had been silent during the conversation, finally spoke. Let the boy bring them, Sarah. It might be good for me too. The next day, David arrived with 3 people. An elderly woman around 60 who limped visibly, a middle-aged man with an atrophied arm, and a young woman who walked with difficulty. Miss Sarah, this is Miss Eleanor, Mr. John, and Jessica. Sarah greeted everyone politely, but still felt uncomfortable with the situation. David told me you do special treatment here. Ms. Eleanor said, my left leg hasn't been working properly since I fell down the stairs at work. And I hurt my arm on a construction site and haven't been able to move it properly since, added Mr. John. David organized a group session in the backyard. Sarah watched fascinated as the boy conducted the exercises with impressive naturalness. He adapted each movement to the specific needs of each person. Breathe deeply, Ms. Eleanor. Now raise your arm very slowly, Mr. John. Try to bend your pinky finger just a little, Jessica. Support your weight on your good leg and let the other relax. Arthur participated in the exercises in his wheelchair, following David's instructions along with the other patients. Sarah noticed that he seemed more animated than he had been in weeks. After 2 hours, everyone showed small improvements. Ms. Eleanor was able to put more weight on her injured leg. Mr. John moved 2 fingers he hadn't moved in months. Jessica walked a few steps without limping. How do you feel? Sarah asked. Better, Ms. Eleanor replied. It's been a long time since I felt this way. David has a gift, Mr. John added. He makes us believe we can get better. When everyone left, Sarah sat next to her father in the garden. What did you think, Dad? It did me good to see other people fighting too. I felt less alone. David, how do you manage to help so many people like this? My grandfather used to say that the secret isn't in the hands, it's in the heart. If we really want to help, we always find a way. That night, Sarah made a decision. She called her lawyer and asked for information on how to legally transform the mansion into a rehabilitation center. It's possible, Sarah, the lawyer explained, but you would need licenses, insurance, structural adaptations. How much would it cost? About $40,000 at least. It was money she didn't have. Sarah hung up the phone, disheartened. The next day, David brought 5 more people from the community. The news about the exercises had spread quickly. Miss Sarah, can I say something? David asked after the session. Of course. The people in the community want to pay for the treatment. Not much because they don't have money, but a little bit each. David, I can't charge people. Why not? You're offering a service and they want to pay because they value what they receive. Sarah had never thought of it that way. How much do they want to pay? About $4 per session, and there are many interested people. Sarah quickly did some mental calculations. If she could get 15 patients a day, 5 days a week, it would be an income of $2,400 a week. It wasn't much, but it would help with basic expenses. Okay, David, we'll try. Really? The boy's eyes lit up. Really, but I need to organize everything properly. In the following days, Sarah began to structure what would become the first community rehabilitation center. She converted the ballroom into an exercise space, bought basic equipment, and created a schedule of times. David helped with everything from organizing materials to assisting patients. Martha, initially resistant, ended up getting involved as well, preparing teas and light snacks to offer after the sessions. Arthur actively participated in the project. For the first time since the onset of paralysis, he had a purpose. He observed each patient, learned David's techniques, and even began to offer suggestions. Sarah, Mr. Williams has the same problem I had, he said one afternoon. Perhaps he needs more conversation and less physical exercise. It was the longest sentence Arthur had uttered in months. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like it and especially subscribe to the channel. This helps us a lot as we're just starting, continuing. After a month of operation, the center had a waiting list of 30 people. The patient's improvements were visible, and word of mouth had spread the fame of the miracle boy throughout the region. Sarah was beginning to believe she might be able to save the mansion when Robert Miller reappeared. I see you've turned your house into some kind of popular clinic, he said, observing the movement in the garden. I turned it into a legitimate business, Sarah replied. A business? Robert laughed. Sarah, you don't have a license to operate a clinic. Do you know what can happen if someone gets hurt here? People come of their own free will. That Doesn't matter legally, and besides, you still owe the money your father stole from our company. My father didn't steal anything, and you know that. Prove it. In the meantime, you have 72 hours to accept my offer, or I'll take legal action. What kind of action? I can report your illegal clinic to the health authorities. I can file a collection lawsuit that will seize all your assets. I can make your life a living hell, Sarah. When Robert left, Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She had invested all her hopes in the rehabilitation center, but now she realized she had built a house of cards. That night, she talked to her father about the situation. Maybe Robert is right, Dad. Maybe we should accept his offer. No, Arthur said with a firmness Sarah hadn't heard in years. We won't hand over our house to that scoundrel. But Dad, if he reports the center, then we'll make the center legal. With what money? Arthur was silent for a few minutes. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Sarah approached her father's chair. Robert didn't just steal the company's money. He also forged documents to make it look like I diverted the funds. How do you know that? Because I have copies of the original documents. I hid them in a bank account that Robert doesn't know about. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having trusted him. Ashamed of having let our family get to this point. But with these documents, we can prove your innocence. We can. And we can also sue Robert for forgery and embezzlement. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anger. Why didn't you do this before? Because I gave up fighting. But now, seeing you taking care of so many people and seeing David bringing hope to our house, now I want to fight again. The next day, Sarah scheduled a meeting with her lawyer to plan the legal strategy. But when she arrived at the office, she discovered that Robert had arrived first. Good afternoon, Sarah. Robert greeted with a cynical smile. Dr. Adams was telling me about your plans to sue old clients. The lawyer seemed uncomfortable. Sarah, perhaps it's better if we talk about an amicable agreement. Sarah realized that Robert had intimidated the lawyer. He had probably offered money or made threats. You don't need to worry, Dr. Adams. I'll find another lawyer. Sarah, be sensible, Robert said. You can't beat me. Accept my offer and end this charade. The charade was yours, Robert, and I'll prove it. When Sarah arrived home, she found David waiting in the garden with a worried expression. Ms. Sarah, something bad happened. What is it? A man from the city hall came here today. He said he received a complaint that you're operating without a license. And then, he said he'll be back tomorrow with a team to close the center. Sarah felt the world spin. Robert had carried out his threat. David will have to cancel all appointments tomorrow. But Miss Sarah, some people depend on the exercises. Miss Eleanor was walking for the first time in 2 years. I can't risk them arresting you for illegal operation. That night, Sarah barely slept. She woke up several times thinking about all the patients who would be harmed by the center's closure. In the morning, she found David already in the garden, tidying up the exercise equipment. David, she said, I told you to cancel the appointments. I did, Miss Sarah, but I thought of something. What? What if today we didn't charge anything? What if it was just a group of friends exercising in the backyard? David, it's not a crime to exercise with friends, right? Especially if it's free. Before Sarah could answer, people started arriving. First Miss Eleanor, then Mr. John, then Jessica. In a few minutes, there were 15 people in the garden. David told us you're having trouble with the law. Ms. Eleanor said, we came to show support. We don't want them to close. The center, Mr. John added. It's the only place where we get treatment that really works. Sarah was too emotional to speak. So it's decided. Ms. Eleanor said, we'll continue going to the exercises, and if this Robert wants to threaten anyone, he'll have to threaten all of us. The meeting ended with an agreement. Patients would go in groups, always accompanied by neighbors and family members. If Robert tried to intimidate anyone, all the others would be immediately informed. The next day, instead of 3 people, 40 people appeared at the mansion. Many were family and friends of the patients who came just to show support. David organized a group session in the garden. There wasn't enough space for everyone to exercise, but the presence of so many people sent a clear message. The community was united. Robert appeared during the session, but when he saw the crowd in the garden, he didn't even get out of his car. He watched from afar for a few minutes and then left. He got the message, Arthur commented, observing from the window. What message? That he's no longer fighting against our family, he's fighting against an entire community. In the following days, support for the center grew surprisingly. Local merchants began donating materials for the exercises. A nursing school offered volunteer students to help with the sessions. A retired physical therapist offered to teach David more advanced techniques. "Miss Sarah, I've never seen anything like this," David said, observing the movement in the garden. "It seems like everyone wants to help." "It's because you planted a seed, David, and now it's growing." Arthur's progress also accelerated with all the support. Inspired by the community movement, he began to participate more actively in the sessions, not only as a patient but as an organizer. "Sarah, I want to do something to help," he said one afternoon. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to tell my story to people, explain how I got here, and how I'm managing to get out." "Dad, are you sure?" "I am. I think it can help other people who are going through the same thing I went through." The following Saturday, Arthur gave his first lecture at the center. He spoke about depression, about how Robert's betrayal had affected not only his finances, but his will to live. "I thought my life was over," he told an audience of 30 people, "that I would never be useful to anyone again. But this boy," he pointed to David, "taught me that we only stop being useful when we stop trying." The lecture moved everyone present. Many people identified with Arthur's story and asked him to repeat the experience. "Dad, you have a knack for this," Sarah said later. "You should consider doing more lectures." "I already am. I think I've found my new purpose." Meanwhile, the lawsuit against Robert was progressing rapidly. Sarah's lawyer had presented all the evidence, and the prosecution was convinced they had a solid case. "Robert is trying to buy time," Dr. Charles explained in a meeting. "He knows he's going to be convicted, so he's trying to negotiate a lighter sentence." "What kind of negotiation?" "He wants to confess to the crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence and probation." "And do you think we should accept?" "Personally, I think you've already won. Robert will have to return all the money, pay heavy fines, and will still have a criminal record. His life as an entrepreneur is over." Sarah thought about the proposal. Justice didn't necessarily mean revenge. "I'll talk to my father and give you an answer." That night, Sarah and Arthur discussed the agreement at length. "What do you think, Dad?" "I think Robert has already lost everything that mattered to him. Power, reputation, the company. Putting him in jail won't change anything for us." "So, you want to accept the agreement?" "I want Robert to pay for his crimes, but I don't want our family to be involved in a lawsuit for years. We have more important things to do." The next day, Sarah called the lawyer, accepting the agreement. Robert would confess to all crimes, return the stolen money with correction and interest, pay a fine of $100,000, and be on probation for 5 years. "It's a good decision," Dr. Charles said. "You'll recover much more money than you lost, and you'll have peace to live your lives." 2 weeks later, Robert appeared at the mansion for a final conversation. He was visibly dejected, dressed in simple clothes and driving a modest car. "Sarah, I wanted to apologize personally," he said. "Robert, your apologies don't bring back the 3 years my father spent in a wheelchair. I know, but I want you to know that I regret everything I did." "What do you intend to do now?" "I don't know. I lost everything. The company, the house, the family. My wife filed for divorce when she found out about everything." Sarah looked at the man who had been her family's nightmare for so long. Now he seemed just a tired, defeated old man. "Robert, you're still young. You can start over." "I don't know where to start." "Start by asking forgiveness from all the people you harmed, and then find a way to help instead of just destroying." When Robert left, Sarah felt that an important chapter of her life was finally closed. At the rehabilitation center, activities continued to grow. With the money recovered from the lawsuit, Sarah was finally able to legalize the operation, buy adequate equipment, and hire qualified professionals. David, now 11 years old, had become a kind of general coordinator. He helped organize sessions, trained new volunteers, and continued to develop innovative techniques that combined traditional physical therapy with emotional support. "David, I want to make you a proposal," Sarah said one afternoon. "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to live here with us officially as a member of the family." "Really?" David's eyes lit up. "Really? You've been part of our family for a long time. Now we just need to make it official. And my friends from the street, can they come too? We have room for everyone." "Indeed, David, you completely changed our lives. It's only fair that we change yours too." 2 months later, the mansion had been transformed into a kind of schoolhouse. David and his 4 friends lived there, studied at a private school in the area, and helped manage the rehabilitation center. Arthur had not only started walking again, but had become the center's main lecturer. His talks on overcoming adversity and rebuilding attracted people from all over the metropolitan area. "Dad, you've become a local celebrity," Sarah joked, seeing the line of people waiting to talk to him after a lecture. "It's not celebrity, daughter. It's just a man who learned that falling is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new rise." The rehabilitation center had become a reference in the region, not only for the physical results it achieved with patients, but for the humanized approach that David had taught the entire team. "Physical therapy doesn't just treat muscles and joints," David explained to the nursing students who came for internships. "It treats whole people with fears, dreams, stories." Sarah observed the transformations around her with a sense of accomplishment she had never experienced. Her marketing company had gone bankrupt along with her father's construction company, but now she had something much more important, a true purpose. "David, can I ask you a question?" she said one late afternoon when they were organizing the material for the next day. "Of course, Miss Sarah. Why did you stop our car that day on the road?" David smiled. "Because you looked like sad people who needed help. And my grandfather always said that when you see someone who needs help, you have to try to help." "But how did you know you could help my father?" "I didn't know. I just knew I had to try. And what if it hadn't worked? Then, at least we would have tried. My grandfather used to say that the only real failure is not trying." Sarah hugged the boy who had saved her family. "David, you know you're the greatest gift I've ever received in my life, right? You are also a gift in my life, Miss Sarah. All of you are." 1 year after the center opened, the City Hall invited Sarah to a meeting about the possibility of turning the project into an official city program. "We want to replicate your model in other neighborhoods," the health secretary explained. "With City Hall support, funding, and technical staff." "It's an interesting proposal," Sarah replied, "but I have some conditions." "What are they?" "First, David has to be the pedagogical coordinator of all centers. Second, the focus always has to be on humanizing care, not just on physical results. Third, local communities have to actively participate in management." "We agree with everything. When can we start?" "As soon as David approves." When Sarah told David about the City Hall's proposal, he became thoughtful. "Ms. Sarah, what do you think?" "I think it's an opportunity to help many more people, but if it gets too big, it won't lose the family feel it has here." "It doesn't have to lose it. It depends on how we organize it. And if it doesn't work, then we try another way." "Didn't your grandfather say that the important thing is to try?" David smiled. "He did. Then let's try." 6 months later, there were 5 community rehabilitation centers operating. Each maintained the philosophy developed by David, but adapted to the specific needs of each neighborhood. Arthur had become a kind of ambassador for the project, traveling to cities in the region to teach other families about the process of overcoming adversity. "Dad, Don't you get tired of traveling so much? Sarah asked. Sarah, after 3 years paralyzed in a wheelchair, any movement is a blessing. And you like to tell your story? I do, because I see that our experience can help other people. Every family that manages to get back on its feet makes everything we went through worthwhile. David, now 13 years old, divided his time between studies, coordinating the centers, and developing new therapeutic techniques. He had become a local celebrity, but maintained the same simplicity as always. David, don't you get bothered by all this attention? Sarah asked after a television interview. I don't. My grandfather used to say that if we have the opportunity to spread good things, we have to take advantage of it. And if all this ends one day, then we start over. The important thing is never to stop trying to help people. One Saturday afternoon, 2 years after the encounter on the road, Sarah was organizing documents in the office when she found the first report about the center. Rereading the article, she was moved, remembering everything they had been through. David appeared at the office door. Miss Sarah, is everything okay? I'm just remembering how it all began. Do you want me to tell you something? Of course. The day I stopped you on the road, I didn't know if it would work. Really. I just knew I had to try. My grandfather always said that sometimes we don't need to know the end of the story, we just need to start the first chapter. And do you think this story has already reached its end? I don't think so. I think we're still at the beginning. Sarah looked out the window at the garden where it all began. Now there was a sign at the entrance that read, Arthur Campbell Community Rehabilitation Center, where healing begins in the heart. David, can I ask you one last question? You can. If you could go back in time, would you change anything? David thought for a few minutes. I wouldn't change anything because everything that happened, good and bad, brought us here. And this is a very good place to be. Sarah hugged the boy who had transformed their lives. David, thank you for stopping our car that day. Thank you for stopping Miss Sarah. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of Sarah, Arthur, and David's story. Do you believe that small gestures can transform entire lives? If this story touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about overcoming adversity and hope.